Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Community Development Block Grant training session on using AmpliFund for financial requests. Today, we will be focusing on the 2020 awards that's currently within AmpliFund. Come June and July, we will focus on those projects that will be migrating in the system. My name is Rebecca Shademan, and I am one of the representatives from the Nebraska Department of Economic Development who will be conducting this training. I'm also joined by Steve Charleston, Amber Ward, and Jennifer Zarek. In addition, we have our AmpliFund representative, Dan Holtz, joining us. Before we begin, I do want to go over a few housekeeping items. You may have noticed that we are recording this event today. Since we are recording, I programmed it so everybody's muted upon entry. However, if everyone can take a moment to ensure that they are muted. If you are using your computer audio, please make sure there is a red microphone next to your name. If you are using your phone for audio, please make sure your phone is muted. If you have any questions regarding the information presented today, please use the chat function. That is located in the right-hand panel, lower part of your screen. Please direct all the chats to the host and panelists. We will be monitoring the chat function for any questions that you might have, and we'll answer those as we are presenting the information today. And at the end of the presentation, we will also be taking a look at any other questions that come up. Next up, I did want to highlight a few of our resources. We have our website, the CDBG webpage, and also our AmpliFund webpage. And then here is the direct link to our contact listing. We'll go there real quick. So to see our CDBG webpage, you'll just go to opportunity.nebraska.gov/CDBG. If you have any questions on how financials should be reviewed, what's considered eligible, what is not, please go to the grant administration section. This is where our manual is located at, and we do have a chapter specifically on financials. We are currently working on updating this to reference AmpliFund information and new procedures that will be rolled out as we migrate everything into the AmpliFund system. So there will be an update on this chapter in the coming months. Another highlight that I wanted to make everybody aware of is last year we did our full certification training on our webpage. If you are new to the financial within the CDBG program and need a little bit of a refresher, this relates just to the program specific information on financials. We do have a recording available here. Also, in addition, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to your program representative. They are happy to help and can walk you through anything that maybe you need a little bit of guidance on. Next up, we have our AmpliFund webpage here. The two main areas that you'll be focusing on anytime you are working on a CDBG grant is the general FAQ, which is located right here, and the Community Development Block Grant. When you click on Community Development Block Grant, you'll notice these two tabs here, application. For those that are 2020 grants, you'll be focusing on this award management tab here. And as we update information, it will always be posted here. Great. Any questions? I don't see any coming into the chat. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I am now going to turn it over to Dan Holtz for our presentation, and he'll be walking us through AmpliFund and focusing on the financial request.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, everybody, for joining today. I appreciate everybody making the time. So as Rebecca mentioned, we are going to be going through AmpliFund financial processes for the CDBG awards. And really what our agenda looks like today is going through a few specific items. We're going to talk about the process to submit reimbursement requests. Then we're going to touch on how to submit advance requests. Once we're through with all the details that are involved in those processes, we'll talk a little bit about uploading documentation, what type of documentation needs to be uploaded and where we can do that. We'll leave some time for any questions. Rebecca already mentioned you can use that chat feature to submit any questions. And then again, we can review some of the support options, whether they're AmpliFund support options or the resources that are available on the DED website. So that is the agenda for today, and we're going to go in this order. So the first thing that we're going to take a look at is the process in order to submit a reimbursement request. So I'm going to switch my screen over now, and we are going to dive into AmpliFund and take a look at what that process entails and how we can submit those reimbursement requests. So I'm going to switch my screen. All right. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started. A couple of quick reminders as we're getting into AmpliFund and as we're diving in here. Just wanted to touch on some of the navigational elements. I know a lot of us have already been in the system and are pretty used to how to navigate around, but just in case, just wanted to point out that the left navigation menu here is our main source of kind of navigating through the different functionality within AmpliFund. So like getting to your grant, you're going to utilize this grant management section. We're also going to take a look at some reports today that are going to help us view our expense and our reimbursement data. So these are the two main areas of the left navigation menu that I'm going to be focused on today and that we're going to be utilizing in the training. You'll also notice in the top right-hand corner of your screen, your name will appear here. This is your user drop-down menu. We'll have a lot of user-specific options here, like changing your password, accessing help and support within AmpliFund, as well as your icon toolbar up here. I'm going to be referencing specific actions that take place within the icon toolbar today as we're going through the different pages, adding in expenses, creating reimbursement requests. So keep an eye out on this icon toolbar here in the top right-hand corner. As you're going through it, if you don't know what one of the icons does, you can always hover your mouse over the icon and it'll tell you exactly what it does. So those are some of the main navigational elements, and a lot of that is included on the instructional material and the support guides that are available on the DED website, as well as the AmpliFund support site, which we'll share later on today as well. So getting started and getting into your award, once you're logged into AmpliFund, you'll be able to access your award and all the information within it by going to the grant management section and clicking on grants. So this is going to bring you a list of all existing grants that you have. You may have a lot of current grants for CDBG or other DED programs. If you do, then you'll see a list of all of those here. I just have the one public works grant that we're going to be working on today. So this is the one that I want to work on. So I'm going to go and I'm going to click on the name of the grant, which is going to take me into the award details page. A lot of the details here on the award are things that we're already relatively familiar with, but some things that are always good for reference purposes. It's always nice to just kind of see what your total awarded amounts are, what the match requirements may be. These fields update with financial information, so there's not a lot here right now, but as we begin to kind of build out expenses and submit our reimbursements, we'll see some of these data fields start populating with expense information. And then on some of this award information, you'll always be able to locate your contract number here, see who your grant managers are at DED, and then also the key dates for your award as well. Since this is a financially focused training and we want to walk through the process of getting to the point where we can request reimbursement, we're going to go ahead and start by taking a look at our grant budget. So in order to access the grant budget, I'm going to go into the post-award drop-down menu here. And again, it's a financial centric training. So we're going to go to the financial tab and I'm going to click on budget. So once I click on the budget option here, it's going to bring me to a page that shows me what my grant budget is. So you'll see any approved category for your grant award. You'll see that here. You also have a number of options across the top. So a good option to check is if you want to see how your grant budget is broken out, not just with the grant funded amount, but also with the match amount. You'll be able to check this box here that says match. So you'll be able to add in and you'll be able to see what those match amounts are for your grant budget. You can go through, you can look at the total amounts for your line item and see any details here that are available on the budget. Now, once you've started to incur specific expenses and you want to submit your first request for reimbursement, we're going to want to first add in the specific expenses that we are requesting reimbursement for. And there's a few ways that you can do that. You can click on the little dollar sign icon here next to the line item. The easiest way to get to the expense page where I can create expenses here is by going to the post-award dropdown, again, financial, because we're focused on the finances today, and clicking on expenses. So once I click on this expense page here, this is going to take me to a page where I'm able to do two things. I'm able to either click run, which is going to just show me a list of all the expenses I've already added in, or as you see down here in this all expenses section, we have the ability to add new expenses. And that's what we're doing today. I want to add in new expenses that I'm going to request reimbursement for. So I'm going to click on the plus sign here, and that's going to allow me to add each individual expense. So first thing I'm going to do is click on the plus sign, and it's going to open up a window for me, which allows me to start adding in my expense. You'll see some of the specific details that are included up here. It shows you what grant you're on. So, like I mentioned before, you may have multiple grants in your account. If you do, then you'll want to make sure that you've selected the correct grant you're entering an expense for. You can choose the category that you want to enter in an expense for as well. So making sure that, from your list, you're choosing the correct category that you want to add any expense for there. And then you'll also be able to go in and you'll be able to indicate the line item, which, for the most part, it'll be one line item. But for example, here in my senior centers category, I have senior centers and I have the construction management line item as well. So making sure that we're just choosing, the accurate category and line item when we're adding in our specific expense. So once we have all of this selected, we're going to go ahead and we're going to actually add the expense and put that in the direct cost. Now, what we're looking at here for the direct cost is I'm looking to add in the total amount of my expense, the total being the grant funded amount plus the match amount. So on this particular expense, I'm going to enter in as $31,667.50. Now, some of this is going to be grant funded and some of this is going to be matched. And we're going to be able to distinguish between that here in this financials tab. But for right now, I'm going to add the total amount grant funded plus match right here in my direct cost section. As you're scrolling down, you'll see a couple of auto-populated fields just indicating who the responsible individual is and the username associated with creating the expense, which should be you or whoever's creating the expense. And then we also have the expense date field here. Now, the expense date is really important because this determines which reporting period your expense is going to belong to. And making sure that we have the accurate date in which this expense was incurred is really important. You'll notice that the expense date is going to auto-populate. It's going to just default to today's date, right? So even though I'm reporting the expense today, this expense was probably incurred in an earlier month or in an earlier day. So in my specific scenario here, I know that this expense was actually incurred back in February. So I'm going to choose a February date so that when I'm creating my reporting period and when I'm doing other reporting, I accurately see that this expense actually happened in February. So making sure that I choose the right expense date is what we're going to be focused on here. Also, we have this expense status. If this is an expense that we want to roll up into our reporting period and then roll up into our reimbursement request, then we're going to have to change the expense status from new to reviewed. You'll see that if the expense status is not listed as reviewed, it will not roll up into your reimbursement request. And you'll have to come back in here and you'll have to mark that as reviewed. So making sure that, again, expense date is the actual date that the expense was incurred and that the expense status reflects reviewed. If you have a payee, like a contractor or something along those lines, you can add in payee information here by just clicking on that Create New button and then typing in the name of your payee. So please make sure that you go ahead and enter in that payee information here if you have it. It's not required. There's additional tabs that are available here. So
Dan?
Yes.
Sorry, before we move on, we had a couple questions that came up in the chat. So right now we're going through an example of a public works project. Someone was wondering, they have an owner-occupied rehab project, and they were wondering in the category section if that's linked to their budget. So those categories will be showing up for them and showing the category lines. If you scroll up just a smidge.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yes. So the categories that appear here in your dropdown are based on like what you're asking, the project that you're adding an expense for. So just like when we went in and the first thing I did was I looked at that grant, I looked at my public works grant, and we saw that budget. All those budget categories are available to choose from here because I'm within this grant. If you have a different grant with different categories, then when you select that grant, those are the categories that will appear in your dropdown.
Cool. Next up, we did receive a question of what if there are multiple dates that expenses were incurred and expenses were all submitted on one bill. So I'm going to make a couple assumptions with this question. So I'm assuming that you are maybe working with a contractor and they submitted an invoice to you for pay request number 1 to the local unit of government, and it has several invoices from different businesses for purchasing lumber, plumbing materials, all the fun stuff. Then you would use the date that that overall invoice is associated with. And Jennifer, do you want to highlight this, because I think you have the instructions we were clarifying on. What date do they put in for the expense date here?
The expense date should be when it was paid. Or if you're doing a batch, we said the most recent date for the latest one in your group.
Thank you. So this would be when, think of those local units of government that oftentimes are submitting a request for funds to the department, and they've already paid those invoices to that contractor or organization. You would use the date that local unit of government paid for those invoices. I think those are all the questions we received. We'll be going, we have some local units of government that are not able to pay the invoices and need to request funds from NDED in order to pay for those invoices. We'll be going over that process later on in the presentation. Thank you for all those questions.
Yes, thank you. And keep the questions coming as we're going through this. And like Rebecca said, we will be going through the advanced request process as well once we wrap up the reimbursement request process. All right, so you'll notice that there's a number of tabs here when we're adding in a specific expense. So far, what we've done is we've gone through the first tab where we're entering in, the date that the expense was paid, the most recent date. We're adding in a payee if necessary, and we're adding in that direct cost. So the direct cost, as I mentioned before, should be the total grant funded amount plus match amount. So we're going to put that total amount in here, and on the financials tab, we'll be able to indicate how much of this $31,667.50 is coming from matching funds. So in my specific example here, I can tell you that that the $6,667 is coming from matching funds. So if I want to indicate that, I'm going to go down here to my cash match amount field. And I'm going to add this as a dollar amount. So I'm going to click that dollar option, and I'm going to type in $6,667.50. So you'll see once I type that dollar amount in, I indicate that that's my cash match amount. And then you'll see here up top the actual breakdown. So our direct cost is, again, the total amount of the grant funded plus match. Right, $25,000 of grant funded, and then I have $6,667.50 of matching funds. There may be a scenario also where you have program income that is part of or that is also being used for this specific category or line item. And if you want to record that program income, you'll be able to go to the custom tab here, which has a section specific to entering in your program income amounts. So note here that these program income fields are required. So even if you're not utilizing program income, then you're going to want to have to choose no, enter in $0 and put in no here, and then again enter in $0. So this custom tab is where you're going to be tracking your program income in RLF dollars. The financials tab shows a breakdown of grant funded versus match as soon as you go in and you update this cash match amount field here.
Hey, Dan, we did receive one more question. Does DED want the split between cash and matching funds to be documented on the attached invoice so everything ties together? So that depends. In most of the invoices that are received, usually they are split with cash and matching funds, and a calculation is done. However, we do have seen in the past invoices and expenses that have come in and they're only being paid out of matching funds. So my recommendation would be to consult with your program rep depending on that situation. If just to see how complicated it is, you can batch them together if you want. If you are batching in multiple expenditures together for this, I usually with our paper forms, you guys do provide us an Excel spreadsheet of kind of like telling us how you calculated everything within to keep track of your CDBG funds and your matching fund dollars. But I would consult with your program rep first if you are having some questions and it's a little bit more layered. Jennifer, do you have anything to add with that?
No, I think that's good guidance. You could also break it out into different expenses if that makes it easier.
We did have a question of what about the box exclude from match? Would that be checked as the cost of general admin construction management costs? So that's on the general tab. So yes, you would check that if that was general administration cost for that, because that does not require match on there. And then when you click that, then you would go to financials and you would not be documenting anything within the match field.
Yep, that's correct. And actually, in the next, we're going to add in another expense after this one, and we'll do that as an example. We'll show one without match, but that is absolutely correct.
Thank you. And then did you cover the attachment section for everyone?
Nope, not yet. That's where we're going next.
Okay, great.
All right, and that question about the documentation and splitting it out, that definitely leads us to that our next part of, and the final part of adding in our expense, which is the attachment tab. So it is required that on every expense we are attaching the invoice that reflects the expense as an attachment here. So in order to attach that documentation, you go to the upload files section right here in the attachments tab, and you'll be able to attach that from wherever it is in your on your desktop or wherever it's saved. You'll be able to just upload that by clicking on the choose file and then uploading it. So all those invoices per each expense need to be included and reported on as we're adding in the expense.
Hey, Dan, if you go back to the general tab real quick, we received one more question that I wanted to highlight here. The question is, can we get clarification of who the payee should be for this process? If this is on a reimbursement basis, do you want the payee to be the city village who has already paid the expense, or the vendor contractor firm who was previously paid? So payee should be the contractor, vendor, firm that was issued the invoice that you're attaching as supporting documentation. This is an optional field to complete if you wish to track that. When we send out and provide you guys the instructions, we'll be denoting that on the instructions. And we did have a question on if this training event is being recorded. It is being recorded, and I plan on sending it out next week. We received a question regarding the custom tab. So for program income projects. So, so program income, if you guys have any questions on that, we have that reference in our CDBG administration chapter, and we also have done a training event for that within that technical assistance videos that I showed you guys at the beginning of this. But in general, usually program income is present in economic development category or owner-occupied rehab category. And oftentimes, the local unit of government is aware of when they have local program income. So I cannot give a conclusive statement on this. Overall, CDBG, local CDBG program income needs to be used first to the project before drawing down any new CDBG funds. This is a federal requirement. If you have questions regarding this, please consult with your program representative to see if your local unit of government that you are working with, or if you are part of the local unit of government, if you guys have it, you're currently retaining local program income. We have about 99 local units of government that retain program income at that level right now. So feel free to contact us if you have any questions. So hopefully that answered your question. So for the majority of grants using this, you'll primarily say no, but it is a question you always need to ask and be aware if that local unit of government does have program income and if it needs to be applied to be paying these bills. So thank you.
All right, thanks for submitting the questions. So just to summarize a little bit in terms of the expense creation process, we're going through and we're making sure that we're adding an expense against the proper category and line item. Direct cost field is going to be the grant funded plus match amount. We have our expense date, which should be the date, the most recent date that it was paid. Our expense status needs to be reviewed here. The financials tab will be the place where we get to update and add in how much of this total direct cost is the match amount by clicking on dollar and adding in the match amount here. The attachments tab is where we upload our supporting invoice, our documentation here. And then the custom tab utilized for program income. So once everything is filled out to completion, we can go ahead and I can create my expense here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create my expense, and I can see my expense has been created, and it shows up here at the bottom. If I want to go ahead and add in another expense, all I have to do is just go back to this plus sign and I can create my next expense. So the first thing that we did was we added an expense for our senior centers category and line item. Now I want to go ahead and let's enter one in for our construction management. So what we're going to do is I'm going to add in here my construction management line item by selecting construction management. The total amount for this one is going to be $2,000. So my total expense amount here is $2,000. And on this one, I actually don't have any match. So this is going to be the example where I don't want to have match as an option to populate on my financials tab. I'm going to check the box here that says exclude from match, and you'll see on the financials tab, that's it. There's no match options. So this is just $2,000 in grant funding that I'm requesting. So I click on the exclude from match box. All of our other options here are the same. Our expense date, again, the date that the expense was paid. So the first one that I added in had a February date on it. This may be within a different month, and that's important to be reported as well. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I'm choosing the right month in which the right month and date in which this one was reported for. Down here on the expense status, again, we need to mark our expense as reviewed. We want the expenses to roll up into our reimbursement request, and the only way that it does it is by checking the reviewed option here within this dropdown. Description and payee, same options here if we want to add that in. I already know that I'm not going to have to add anything in my financials tab because remember there's no match that I'm reporting here on this expense. Our attachments tab, we're going to need a copy of that invoice for this expense with which we're requesting reimbursement for. So we've got to make sure that we upload our document here. And then with the program income, going to the custom tab, making sure that this is filled out, whether or not this includes local program income. So the first one didn't. On this one, I'm going to add in the local program income. You just add it in here as the dollar amount. You're still going to have to, enter in a no if there's not other type of program income being used, and a $0 amount. So again, the process of adding the expenses is the same as before. The difference that we have with this one is that it has a different expense date, so it's going to fall into a different month, and there's no match on it. So I checked the exclude from match box in order for match to not even show up as an option here. Everything else is the same in terms of uploading your attachments and filling out the program income section. I'm going to create this expense and get this added in. So now I have two expenses that we've created. The next thing that I want to take a look at here are some of the reporting tools that you have available to you once you have expenses entered. But before we do that, just want to see if there's any questions that may have come in before I move on.
Yes, we received a couple, and
Okay.
I'm going to have Jennifer and Steve on the ready. So one of our questions is, are copies of the paychecks going to also be required as part of the attachment? What if you have, so if you are working on a request and the local unit of government has already paid that vendor, they wrote a check, we would like to see copies of that check that was issued to the vendor contractor firm in general. Okay, so that answers that question. So the second question that came up is, what if you have a community that pays small bills up front but waits for CDBG money to be received before paying large bills, such as contractor bills on streets and public facilities, etc.? I'm going to ask Jennifer, I believe you're talking, if the small bills, same process, you would still show us logging the expenses like we've been showing you. For those larger bills, I believe that goes into the section of advance request. So then that will be, we'll talk about that later in the presentation on how we'll be handling that. Because we know that does happen often. Jennifer, Steve, did I miss anything that you want to add to that?
That's correct, Rebecca. For the large bills that they wait to receive the CDBG dollars for, we will cover that later in the training.
Okay. So we got some more questions. When drawdowns meet the threshold, will source documentation be uploaded and the attachment upload link, bank statement, proof of payment? We are changing our policy and we'll be issuing that out. For 2020 grantees, all source documentation is required for all drawdowns being submitted. So it doesn't matter how much you're requesting, you'll always have to submit that supporting documentation. Correct, Steve? For 2020 grants.
Correct, Rebecca.
Okay. If you're working on older grants, it's different right now, but in the future, it's going to change on older grants. We received a question on expense date. That's when it's paid. Does that mean the date on the check or when the check cleared the account? And to keep this fairly simple for you guys, we are going to go with the date that is on the check. And Jennifer, did I state that correctly?
Yes.
Thank you. So, and then we did receive a question. So you want a copy of every check if it was paid with CDBG dollars or matched dollars? Yes. And so if you have that information at the time of when you're putting these expenses together, you would attach it here. Later on in the presentation, let's say you don't have the bank statements at this point in time when you are logging the expenses in, we'll be going through how to provide those to DED later on in the presentation. And I believe that is all of the questions at this point. Jennifer, Steve, did I miss anything? Do we need to clarify anything that I said?
Yeah, one item, Rebecca. Even though it's the date on the check, the program rep and others does not remove or take away the responsibility of the timing of when that money leaves the account. So it may not be displayed in this process, but that will be reviewed as we go through the financial review and compliance review of period of time before a check is actually cashed and the money leaves the local government's account.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, Dan, you're up.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the questions, too. All right, so we've entered in some expenses. What we want to do now is we want to talk a little bit about some of the reporting tools that you'll have available to you as well. And we're going to highlight two key sections here now. As I mentioned before, in the left navigation menu, you have your report section, and we're going to be looking at a couple of reports in there. Also, you have your analytics page. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just open this up in a new tab here. But if you go in any one of your grant awards and you click on your analytics page, it's going to take you to a page that shows kind of a dashboard view of a lot of your grant activity. And it has a particular focus on your financial activity. So as I scroll down here and we look in this dashboard here, what we're going to start to see populate are visualizations of our spending either to date, we'll see it by month, and importantly, we'll also see spending by category. So this is a really nice tool to access if you want to stay up to date and if you want to be monitoring progress on your specific spending here. You'll be able to see kind of this graph version here. You can change the graph style by right-clicking or by clicking here in any one of these tiles to access that. You can also make this your home page. So if you're working on a particular grant and you want to have easy access into the grant itself, then you'll be able to click on this little homepage icon right here and make this page your home page. So when you first log into AmpliFund, instead of seeing the calendar, you see this dashboard. In addition to the analytics tab here and these grant dashboards, you'll also have access to a couple of reports that are going to be pretty convenient to run. So if you go into the report section here, and if you go to your post-award option, you'll see that we have our grant budget variance and our grant expense detail report. So any of these are going to be really useful in terms of providing an overview of the expense information in a convenient, report format. You click on the grant budget variance report, and it's going to run for all of your grants. I only have one, so it's just showing my one grant right here. But you'll note that it has the specific award name, and then you'll be able to scroll down and you'll be able to see for each specific budget category. You also have the ability to see other pieces of information like the grant funded amount, and you'll be able to see your actuals. So if you scroll over, you'll be able to see not just the budgeted amount, but then how much you have expensed for each category and for each line item. And it's going to calculate here your spend down and your variance between what's been budgeted and what's been spent to date. You'll also have this panel, which provides you with some options in the report that allow you to view information. So one thing that you'll be able to do is you'll be able to go here and you'll see these columns that are showing like budget, grant funded, cash match, in kind. You'll be able to turn on and off specific columns within the report. So for example, if you don't want to see the in-kind match, you'll be able to uncheck this box and it removes it live while you're in the report. So a couple of nice tools that you'll have available here. You can run the grant budget variance report. You can also go here and run the grant expense detail report, which provides a little bit of a different view from the budget variance report. On that budget variance report, we saw spending rolled up as part of a category. This shows us specific expenses. So whereas the grant budget variance report showed me the total amount that I've expensed per line item, this shows me the breakdown of how we got to those total amounts here. And it shows me each specific expense record. You can also filter this report while you're in the report itself. So if you want to view this for a specific category, just choose the category you want and it'll update and it'll show you the spending for just that category. Also, if you want to break this down by line item, you want to drill down to that level of detail, then just choose whichever line item you want to see the expense detail for, and it'll provide you with the information specific to that line item. Another thing that I'll mention here, with any of these reports, you'll be able to export these reports to PDF, Excel, or rich text format. So if you need to if you want to, export something, print something, hand it off to somebody within your organization, then you'll be able to do that by utilizing the export tool here. So those are just some basic reporting options that you'll have available to you. The grant analytics page on the award record, by just going in the award and clicking on the analytics page, as well as the grant budget variance and the expense detail reports. And I'll just pause here, see if any questions have come in.
No new questions have come in. I do want to add clarification. When I said copy of every check, if you have bank statements that show that a check has been issued, and you could use the bank statement, but if it's fairly close and the bank statements aren't available, then yes, we would need to see a copy of the check there. So we are working on getting this all written up and adding clarity for you guys, so hopefully that will be issued shortly. But feel free to consult with your program rep or Steve Charleston, the CDBG program manager, on what supporting documentation is needed.
Excellent, excellent. So now that we've entered in our expenses and we've looked at some of the reporting options, let's start taking a look at how our expenses roll up into our reimbursement request that we're going to create. And to get that process started, once the expenses are entered, we need to go in and create a reporting period. So I'm going to go to the post-award drop-down menu here, and I'm going to go to management, and this is going to allow me to create a reporting period. So what a reporting period is, it allows me to create via monthly intervals the mechanism with which these expenses get associated with the reimbursement requests. In order for expenses to roll up into a reimbursement request, reporting periods need to be created and submitted. And it's done in monthly intervals, like I mentioned. So I have 2 expenses that I need to request reimbursement for, and they're actually within 2 separate months. So I'm going to create 2 reporting periods here, one that's going to accommodate each month. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in the top right-hand corner and click on that plus sign to create my reporting period. The option I'm going to have here is for expenses. So I'm going to check the box there. And then I'm going to go ahead and choose a time period. So as I mentioned, these reporting periods are separated in monthly intervals. Since my expenses were in February and March, I'm going to go ahead and I want to create those February and March intervals. So this is all driven off of that expense date. The expense date drives which month these expenses fall in. So when I go and I click on February and I go to create my February reporting period, it's going to show me my total expensed amount for February. If I had any expenses with a February date that I did not select as reviewed, remember on the expense record itself, we had to mark those as reviewed, that would show up here. It would tell me how many expenses I have that are not reviewed, that may need to be marked as reviewed to get rolled up into the reporting period. So once you create the reporting period, then you'll be able to see, you'll be able to determine, is this the total amount of expenses that I have created with an expense date in February. And then once you verified that, you'll be able to scroll all the way down and click on close. This is the first step to ensuring that your expenses for this month are going to roll up into your payment request. So again, creating the reporting period, making sure that the total expense amount for the period reflects how much you've expensed with an expense date of February, and then scrolling down and clicking close. That's all you have to do here. When you do click close, you'll get this notification, and actually by clicking on close, that sends a notification to the program rep at DED that you've completed a reporting period. You only have to complete reporting periods for months that you have expenses for. So, you know, in this specific example here, what we do is, you know, I only had one for February and for March. I don't have to create one for January, right? Because I don't have any expenses for that date. All I have to do is go ahead and I have to just close this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click close. I get something that tells me my tracking period was saved successfully. That's great. We're going to create another reporting period because remember we had the expense for March, and I want to make sure that I'm creating my reporting period for March. So as I go back to the reporting periods tab up here to access my reporting periods, I'll stop and I'll see if there's any questions that have come in on reporting periods right now.
No questions have been asked about the reporting period.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create my second reporting period here. Remember, we have that expense for March. So now I want to create my March reporting period. I'm going to click on expenses. I'm going to go to select a time frame here. I'm going to choose March. And I'm going to click on save. And here is my $2,000 that's showing for that particular that's showing for that March expense that I have created. It's also showing me that I have unreviewed expense, which I'll get to a little later. But remember, I have the $2,000, and that's really all I need. That's the additional expense that I want to have created here. So I'm going to close the book on my March report here by clicking on close. I'm going to go back to my reporting periods. Now that I have my reporting periods created, I can create the reimbursement request with the expectation that the expenses are going to roll up into my reimbursement request. And in order to create that reimbursement request, it's very straightforward. All I have to do is look at any one of my closed reporting periods. And once you close a reporting period, you'll see that a little icon appears here. If you click on it, it'll take you directly to the screen that allows you to create your payment request. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create our first reimbursement request. One thing that you'll notice here on this page is you'll be able to go through and you'll be able to start putting in key details, like your payment request name. So here on the payment request name, what you're going to do is you are going to include which number reimbursement request you're submitting. So if this is your first reimbursement request, it's going to be called payment request number 1. For example, if you've already had one submitted and approved, then this would be called payment request number 2. But since the first one that we're submitting, I'm going to go ahead and we are going to name this payment request number 1. Here on the date created, we can just choose, it could be today's date, whatever date that we're creating. You'll see, since I created that payment request from the reporting period, it's automatically pulling in my February reporting period in here. Since I have 2 months worth of reporting periods that I need to include in this reimbursement request, I can choose any additional months that I have by clicking here in the drop down and choosing the months that I want to roll up into this reimbursement request. So we had the February reimbursement request and the the February expense reporting period, the March expense reporting period. I can select both here so that both my February and March expenses roll up into the reimbursement request. Yeah.
Can I answer a question real quick?
Yeah.
We had a question about what if it takes multiple reporting periods to meet the $1,500 minimum? And what Dan just showed you of putting multiple reporting periods on one payment request is how you would address that issue. So if it takes you several months to meet the $1,500 minimum, you would close your reporting period each month to track your expenses. And when you had expenses greater than or equal to $1,500, you would put all those reporting periods on the same payment request. I'll give it back to you, Dan.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks for that question. So you would attach all of the associated reporting periods here in this section right here. Since this is a reimbursement request, this payment type will be selected to reimbursement. Once we're done with this, I'll show you the advanced process. And I kept referencing when we were creating those expenses, I kept referencing the roll up expenses into the reporting periods and into the payment request. So this is exactly what I meant by that roll up. By going through and adding in those expenses and tying them to those reporting periods, I can see here that those total amounts have rolled up into my total expenses here. So it shows me automatically that $2,000 and that $31,667 that we had for each category. And it also breaks down the total amount of match, and it shows me here the total amount that we are requesting. So it's going to provide us with this total requested amount here, which should match this net total field. So you still have to come in, you still have to manually type this in. It's kind of a validation thing at this point, just to make sure. But you'll see that your expenses have rolled up because they're tied to those payment requests. I'm sorry, they're tied to those reporting periods. I'm going to continue and just going to talk through some of the additional items here. So you'll see that on the payment request, there's also an upload files button here. So there's specific document that still needs to be uploaded here, which is the request for funds. So you may already have had your request for funds been taken and signed and completed. And if you have, then you just go ahead and you can upload it here. Also, that is the template, and the form is also available through AmpliFund. So if you go into your report section here and under recipient, you'll see CDBG request for funds. I'm going to open this up and we can take a look at our request for funds here. So again, this can be accessed now through AmpliFund, where a lot of the data at the top will probably populate here based on the grant number and what the FEIN is. Those pieces of information will populate, and you have the request for funds document right here. All you have to do is go up and you can export it to Excel. You can still go ahead and fill this out, get it signed, and then you'll have to upload it to here into the payment request. If you've already done this, if you've already retrieved the request for funds document off of the DED website and have gotten it signed, then just go ahead and utilize that and upload that into your request for reimbursement.
Hey, Dan, can you show that form from the Excel that people can export?
Yep. So
just want to highlight to everyone the differences with this form is on the ones on our webpage. You'll remember those are split out by general admin and project costs. With these new ones, you can ask general admin and project costs on the same form. So that's something new. If you have already gotten the form for general admin and project costs from our webpage and have had those signed, we will be accepting those electronically by uploading them into the system. So for these first drawdown, we'll accept those, but now that you guys have received training on this, we will be starting to expect on the second drawdown to see this form being used and signed off by your grantees. So first drawdown, it's okay to use the one on our website. Second drawdown, we want to encourage you to start using this form so we can get it all looking the same for us. Thank you.
Yep, and again, in order to access it, you'll go to the reports, click on recipient reports, and access CDBG request for funds. So back to your reimbursement request here, couple of things to point out. Putting in the name should reflect the payment request number that you're submitting. You'll add in any associated reporting periods. Verify these dollar amounts here. Type in the total requested amount here. And then you're going to want to attach or upload your request for funds document. And once you're all set and you're ready to submit this to DED, to your program rep, you'll go ahead and click on the submit button. You'll get this nice notification here, and it'll ask you, are you sure you want to do this? Are you ready to submit this? Once you submit it, your program rep gets a notification, and you'll just have to click on submit. And now your reimbursement request has been submitted.
Hey, Dan, we
Yeah.
have a couple of questions that came in. So on the new drawdown form, someone asked if only one signature is required. Two signatures are still required, and they have to be the signatures of the individuals that were identified at time of special conditions of the authorized users to request funds. So those are normally the chief elected official and the clerk, normally, unless your local unit of government has a different structure. Then we did receive a question we use this form for 2020 grants, but not earlier ones. So you'll be using this form for 2020 grants. When we migrate data for the older grants, we'll be providing you additional guidance on that at this point. But for 2020, you'll use the one from the system, and then the older grants will provide you technical assistance when that happens. So we'll be setting up trainings for the month of June and July, I believe. So.
And then Rebecca, we had a second question, and it asked, when a project gets an amendment to extend their contract, will more months be added for the reporting periods? And the answer is yes. So if your contract is extended, you will also have extended reporting periods.
And the drawdown, thank you, Jennifer. And I just noticed another comment. The drawdown forms still need to be signed with blue ink. Dan, you might be able to answer this question. We had one person indicate that on the drawdown page, do not hit the enter key or the form gets submitted. Is that something everybody needs to be aware of?
Are we talking about on this payment request page?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you're going through, you can tab through and click through, but just be careful not to hit the enter key, but still you'll get that it'll create the payment request. It won't necessarily submit it. Anytime you're trying to submit it, you'll have that pop-up window appear to just kind of do that double check, verify that you really want to submit it.
Great, thank you. And those are all the questions I see at this point in time.
Excellent. So we tackled submitting, creating expenses and submitting reimbursement requests. one thing that we can move on to and take a look at now is when we need to create advanced requests. So a lot of the pieces of creating advanced requests here are going to be the same, just kind of the opposite in terms of the process. So whereas when we submitted a reimbursement request, we went in, we submitted, we entered in the expenses, did the reporting period and tied everything, and then submitted the reimbursement request last. When we're submitting an advanced request, we start by going to this payment request page. So if you're first logging in, then you're going to go ahead and let's just go back to like when you're first entering it into AmpliFund, and we can start like we're going to be entering an advanced request. So for any scenario where you maybe have invoiced someone, but need the funds to pay the actual invoice and you need to submit an advance request, then you'll be able to go into the grant management section in grants and just get back to your grant award here so that you can get started with submitting your advanced request. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to click on the name of my award. So far, we're getting into the award. As I mentioned before, since we're submitting a request for an advance, we're not going to do the expense part first. We're actually going to do the payment request part first. So I'm going to go to post award, and I want to get back to that payment request page by going to post award, cash flow, payment requests. And here I can see the payment request that I've already created. Since right now I want to submit an advance request, I'm going to go ahead and I am going to click on the plus sign to get started with creating my request for an advance. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to follow the same naming convention as before, where I'm going to submit the type of or the number request that I have. We've already submitted one reimbursement request. This is an advanced request. This is the second one that I'm submitting, the second request overall. So this is going to be payment request number 2. Because remember, we already submitted and had approved payment request number 1. Date created will be today's date. And then you'll see here, I'm going to skip the reporting periods because remember, we don't have the expenses that we've paid yet. We're just submitting the advance. So here under payment type, I'm going to click and I'm going to choose advance. Now I'm going to scroll down, and what we're going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and I want to type in and I want to enter in the total amount that I'm requesting to receive in advance. So this functions similarly to how we built out that expense, where we had the total amount of expenses and then we added in the match contribution as well. So for example here, if I am requesting $5,000 in advance, but I'm also contributing $2,000 of my own money, I'm going to put in a total of $7,000 right here. You'll see that when I go, I can click the pencil icon and I can adjust this to reflect the match amount. So I'm going to click $2,000 because the total amount is going to be, it's $7,000 grant funded plus match, $2,000 worth of match. And the requested amount, I'm actually requesting $5,000 here of grant funds. So I click here and make sure that I enter in the total amount. So once I go there, I can select that. Any of the the invoice here, the supporting documentation needs to be submitted as well. So, proof of this $5,000, and the need for the $5,000, you would want to upload that here in the advanced request. And once you are ready to submit this, again, it's the same process where I click on submit and I get this warning message. Are you sure you want to submit this? And then you can go ahead and click on submit. I will mention that, as I said before, when you submit these requests, your program rep at DED receives a notification that it's been submitted. When the request gets approved, you get a notification that it's been approved, or if it's been denied. Anytime a decision has been made on any one of your submissions, then you'll see that you'll receive a notification that it's been approved or denied. So you'll be able to go down here, and this is your advanced request that you've submitted. You'll be notified once your program rep has reviewed and either approved or denied your request. Any questions before I move on?
Oh, we have a couple.
Okay.
Okay, so with Advance, our grantees notified that CDBG funds will be deposited into their account so they can pay within 5 days. So there's a couple things that can be done. First off, on their ACH form, they can update that if they don't already have it. They can add an email address, and then when the state of Nebraska processes that payment, they would receive an email saying to expect a deposit within the next 2 to 3 business days. The other way, Jennifer, do they get notified in the system when we approve the overall request?
Yes, that's what Dan was just mentioning. When DED makes a decision, you will get a notification on the payment request. The payment request status will also change.
Would the local unit of government, local contact, get a notification? I believe the certified administrator would get one.
Just the recipient grant manager will get the notification.
Okay. So for most of you who are the certified administrator, you guys are the recipient grant manager on there. So you could also notify the local clerk who would be overseeing the payment of that to be expecting a payment. So that's one way. If you are not sure if there is an email address associated with that local unit of government ACH form, feel free to contact Katie Myluka, and I'll provide, after next week, I'll send an email with the recording and I'll provide her contact information so you guys can reach out to her to see if there is an email address associated with that bank account. Okay, hopefully that answered your question. I will need to look into the time span between administrator getting notification that request was approved and the time funds are deposited into a grantee's account. We'll get back to you on that. And then I think we've received one more question. In regards to the minimum amount that we have someone asking about. So previously we had a $1,500 and currently we have a $1,500 minimum for when you are drawing down project costs and $500 for if you are only drawing down general admin. I'm currently looking into that right now, and hopefully by the end of this presentation, I'll get that clarified on there. We will still have a threshold in some component, I believe, but I don't think I have that nailed down at this point. So I'll get back to you by the end of today. I think that covers all of our questions at this point, unless Steve, you want to highlight anything, maybe. Okay.
No, Rebecca, I don't want to highlight any items. The minimums we'll discuss. We're looking at, as Rebecca said, how to evaluate thresholds and also whether or not there's a means on the, especially on the admin side of the administrator, or if it's on some other category, which formula was an activity, if there's a way to put those together as one invoice. We really don't want to process $35 requests many times. That's one of the reasons on the processing and the record keeping, especially on your end too. So Rebecca, as she said, we'll return the favor and get back to you. Thank you.
All right.
Hey,
Thank you
Dan.
for, yeah.
You showed us two examples of like walking us through payment requests and then immediately hitting submit. If you don't hit submit and you hit create, where do you go to find those again?
Yeah, let me do that real quick and I'll just show you an example. So this payment requests section up here is going to house all of your existing payment requests, whether you have just started one and you're working on it, or if you've submitted one, it'll show you your historical payment requests that you've submitted through AmpliFund that have been approved or rejected. So if I go here and, let's say that I'm ready to submit, I'm not ready to submit yet, but I want to just kind of work on this and get it started. So, payment request number 3, I can go in here, fill everything out like I normally would, realize, oh, I need to create my expenses, or, I don't have my request for funds filled out yet. It's fine. Just go ahead and click on create. You'll get this payment request saved, and it'll be available to you in your payment request section that you can access by, either clicking on this payment request tab here at the top, or at any time, you'll be able to go to post-award cash flow payment requests. Here's that third payment request that I started working on here. You'll notice that it's showing as not submitted, and I can go ahead and I can edit this when I'm ready to, upload the files, when I'm ready to add my expenses. I can also delete this if appropriate. That's a really good question. Yeah, you don't have to just generate a payment request and submit it all at once. You can definitely get it started and then work on it incrementally, saving as you go until you're ready for the eventual submission. All right, I am going to move on. And I want to talk a little bit about, once I've submitted an advance request, we still need to eventually report that expense. So like I mentioned, doing the reimbursement request, we're going in first, creating the expense, creating the reporting period, and then submitting the reimbursement request. with the advance request, we start at the payment request section here, create the advance, and then when we're ready to report that expense back to DED, we are going to then go and add in the expense. So if we remember, the way that we can access our expense page is by going to post-award, financial, and expenses. And this is going to take us back to that expense page that we've been working on. So now that I've submitted that advance request, now I'm ready to report my expense. I'm going to click on the plus sign here to create my expense, just like we did last time. And really, everything here is pretty much the same. I need to indicate, which expense I'm submitting, which line item, I'm submitting an expense for that advance. So remember, I submitted that total amount of $7,000. And here's where I can indicate that it's actually been expensed and it's been paid. So I'm going to come in here, type in $7,000. I'm going to add in my expense date here as well. So here I have a April expense date. Let's just say that it was today. I want this to roll up into my next reporting period and in the next reimbursement request. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on Reviewed here, just like I did before. The Financials tab, again, no big deal, nothing different from what we've already done. I'm just indicating the total amount of match on that particular expense. I want to draw our attention. I'm going to skip attachments for now and go to the Custom tab. So here, this is where we get to add in some information for any of our advanced expenses. Since I've already requested an advance for this expense, I need to indicate that here in this section. So I need to type in the name of the payment request that this advance was submitted on. So I'm going to type in payment request number 2. You're going to indicate here the date you received that advance payment from the state, the date the check was issued, and you're going to type in the check number here as well, and the date that the vendor processed the payment. Now, I'm putting in all of April dates, today dates. They don't all have to be the same date, just indicating that we have to indicate that this was already part of an advance request, indicating when we received that payment, when the check was issued and the check number and when the payment was processed. So this has to be included on any expense that was part of an advance request. In addition to filling out this advanced section, we need to add some attachments here. And here on the custom tab, it kind of gives us some guidance. It tells us that we need to include our bank statements and a copy of the cleared check. So when we're adding in this expense, I need to make sure that I am uploading both the bank statement and a copy of the cleared check for which the advance was submitted for. So upload those documents here, and that's how you enter in the expense for your advance request. Are there any questions that have come in about entering the expense information for the advance request?
Yes, we did just receive one. Is the actual expense likely not to land in the dates of the reporting period being used to request the advance? I'm confused, but on this. So if they, oh, go ahead, Jennifer.
The advances don't use the reporting periods. So you request the advance, you receive the funds, and then you create the expense later. The expense you create, and Dan will show this, will be put into the next reporting period that you submit. So after your advance, you'll submit another reimbursement request that will include the expenses from the advance as well as any additional ones that you've paid since then.
I'm hearing from some of our grant attendees that they are no longer able to hear through the website for audio. I'm going to put information on how to change your audio to phone call, and hopefully that will connect everybody. Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, I should continue.
Yep, we're still recording, so.
Okay, excellent. All right, so just remembering, and I almost forgot that these program income questions are always going to be required. So making sure that, even if there's no program income here on the expense, then we're just answering the questions and putting in zeros. So this is our advance, this is our expense that we've entered in for the advance that we've submitted. Big difference here from the other expenses is that the custom tab, we have to fill this out here at the bottom, and we have to attach that cleared check and that bank statement as well. And we can go ahead and click on create, and I can see that the expense is in there. So one of the questions that was asked was, a little bit about kind of how the expenses work relative to how the advance expenses work relative to reporting periods. This expense will get rolled up into whatever the next reporting period is. So I'm going to switch, and let's think about how we're actually going to have to submit our next request and what our next reporting period is going to look like, so that when you're ready to submit it, how do you handle the expense that was entered for the advance request? So let's transition now, and I'm going to go to reporting periods, and let's create a reporting period now for our next reimbursement request, and we can take a look exactly at how that is going to how we handle the advance request on future payment requests. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to go in, and I am going to create my reporting period just like we have in the past. So when we're ready, I'm going to go ahead and click on my plus sign in the top right hand corner, and let's say now I am reporting for April. So I'm going to choose my April date, and I'm going to click save to create that reporting period. So what you're going to see is that I'm going to have a roll up here of all those expenses. And this is going to include that advanced expense that I entered. So this includes advanced expense and any other expense that I'm requesting reimbursement for. So just like I always do, I close out my reporting period, and I'm going to go to submit and create my reimbursement request here. So I'm going to go click on the reimbursement request, you'll see that, that reporting period gets added in. I'm going to type in my payment request name here. Here on the date created, I'll say it was created today. It's a reimbursement. So one thing that we're going to see here is we are going to see a total roll-up of those expenses into the payment request. Now, I know that this is right now showing us the total amount that is being requested, as well as the total amount of that's being requested, as well as the total amount that we submitted for advance. So I just want to make sure that I'm submitting and that I'm requesting based on the right amount here. So since I already requested and received $5,000, then I'm not actually asking for $20,000. I'm asking for $15,000. And I need to explain why my requested amount is not matching my net total. So you're going to want to go here into the comments field, and you're going to say, previous advance was for $5,000, reduced by requested by advance amount. And I would even put, 20,000 minus 5,000 equals 15,000. So make sure that here we are reducing the requested amount by the advance that we received at $5,000, and that we are indicating that here in the comments of why we are doing that. Once you've added that information into the comments here on your request, you're going to attach. This is a reimbursement request still. So you're still going to go ahead, you're going to attach your request for funds form, and you're going to create and you're going to submit this as normal, just with the balance reduced by whatever you requested before and received as an advance, and you'll indicate that here. And then when you're ready to submit and have this go to your funding, to DED program rep, you'll go ahead and you'll click on the submit button, and your program rep will get a notification, and they'll be able to see these comments that you've added in. Any questions before we move on to our final topic, which are the uploads?
I'm not seeing any new questions.
Okay. Then let's talk about uploads. One thing that you'll be required to upload is the professional services contract. So let's talk a little bit about where that needs to happen and how you can upload those documents to DED. If you go into your tools drop-down menu, you'll see that you have a documents folder here. This documents folder will contain a series of folders that you need to access to download specific items or to upload specific items to DED. So anytime you want to upload something and share it with your DED program reps, go into the public folder. This is the shared folder between you and DED. Anything you upload here will be visible to your DED program reps. And you see here that there's a number of folders where information will be uploaded for you.
Hey, Dan.
Yes.
Just want to, so this is brand new to everybody on the call. So everything, the project status reports, the correspondence, the contract, and program guidelines, only DED staff will be uploading documents in there, but they are there for you to view them. We thought these items would be helpful during the transition of maybe there's new local contact at the local unit of government, or maybe there's a new certified administrator. They would have this as a background of core documents here. So you will never upload anything in those top 4 file folders, only DED staff will. What you will upload will be within the recipient upload folder, which Dan will click on. Thank you.
And you'll see that there are folders here that are already going to be created for you to kind of guide you as to, what to upload and where. So as I was mentioning, your professional service agreements need to be uploaded here in the professional service agreements folder. You just click on the folder and you go in the top right-hand corner, there's this upload documents option. And the process of uploading is the same as it's been before. And just go ahead, upload that professional services agreement.
And if you have more than one professional service that you procured for, or that's going on, I do recommend you create folders and name those folders after that professional service activity. So if you have engineer, that would be a folder name. If you have general administrator, that would be a folder heading. We'll be providing guidance on this. Also, as part of our monitoring component, we'll be requesting that you guys also, if procurement was required, we'll be requesting that you also upload the procurement materials. We're hoping to get that, those instructions out to you guys next week, but just for your clarification on this for professional service agreements. Anything you upload, we're not able to edit. When you guys upload it, we only have a download version for us. So if you could clearly indicate in the naming structure what that file means, so we don't have to open each file to determine what that file means, that would be very helpful. We'll add some guidance in those instructions next week for you all. And Dan, I did have a quick question. Someone was wondering, how is that documents folder different from the documents on the left-hand side?
Really good question. So it's not that different. The main difference in terms of where we go in the documents folder is what makes the difference. So here I access this documents folder from the grant. If you wanted to go straight to your documents folders, if you go to the documents section and click on grants, it'll just show you a list of all the grants that you have and all the documents folders there. So like it just takes you into the main, back into the main folder, just kind of a different way to get there. But you'll still see it's the same folder. You still have the public folder here, which is where you'll find your recipient upload folder where you can share information with DED, and then all of those other folders where they will share information with you. Just a different way to get to it, basically.
Hey, Dan, do you want to click on recipient upload?
Yep.
Again, thank you. One folder I wanted to highlight here is you'll see payment requests, additional information. So this folder is only for if you are submitting a reimbursement process and you finally get the bank statements. This is where you would upload those bank statements for us. We would not need the invoices to be uploaded here. You already did that when you created those expenses. This is purely just those bank statements here, or any other supporting documentation that you could not add when you were doing that reimbursement type of request. We do recommend that you create a folder here and identify the payment request that that bank statement refers to. That would be extremely helpful because I believe it'll get longer and longer as the project's being implemented. So to help us narrow down everything. And I'm just checking to see if we have any questions. Not seeing any yet.
Rebecca, I see one question in the Q&A. The question is about source documents. So you will always upload your source documentation on the expenses. On the advance, where you make the drawdown request first before you log the expense, you will put your invoice on the advance, and then you will also put it on the expense. I believe that's what was being asked.
Thank you. And I've mentioned this in the chat to a couple people, but we'll be making the recording available early next week. We'll also be having instructions available, so maybe you didn't get everything written down as we were going over this. So, but if you need to submit a drawdown request earlier than like Wednesday, feel free to give me a call, and I can also provide assistance. If you have any questions following this training, and feel free to send them to me directly. I'm consolidating all the questions and making sure we have answers to them in our instructions, and we may be making a brief FAQ depending on the amount of questions we get. We do have tomorrow off because it is Arbor Day, so we're hoping to get you guys answers by early next week, sometime Monday through Wednesday. We appreciate you guys staying on the call about 17 minutes extra. Thank you for attending today.